Looking at a lifestyle. 1. Modern society will find no solution to the ecological problem unless it takes a serious look at its lifestyle. Pope John Paul II. A preamble. It is universally recognized among those who are paying attention to political, economic, and environmental changes that how most of us will live in the not-distant future is uncertain. But though uncertain as to details, it is certain that many of those using the most of the Earth's bounty will have to use less. The details of how to distribute the reductions for those using more of the Earth's capacity than can be justified will become the most vital and important history ever lived and written by us. Either the greatest possible demonstration of our capacities for compassion and goodwill, or the greatest demonstration of our talents for destructiveness. I am, I suppose, like most people. I want to live and work in my community and society to be seen as somewhat normal and acceptable. I am an unlikely person to be an environmental activist, a poor boy from the rural South. I followed my interests in ethics, eventually leading to a middle-class lifestyle. That was more an accident of opportunity, never a real goal. My adult life has been lived as a teacher and small businessman. In an enlightening moment in the mid-1990s, I came across a data collection and summarizing effort called the Ecological Footprint. This monumental project was attempting to use the vast amounts of economic, behavioral, and environmental data collected by the world's governments and institutions to measure the human use of the Earth's resources, to use ecological data collected by governments and academia to measure the Earth's productive and buffering capacities. If reasonable measures of these things could be made, then our human use of the Earth could be compared to the capacities of the Earth to meet those needs. The first summaries of the data proved shocking. Humans appeared to be using the Earth's resources at a greater rate than the Earth's capacities to produce and recover. For Earth's life-sustaining systems, that would be catastrophic. Further, the researchers who created the ecological footprint measurements have never been criticized for being alarmist, but only for being too conservative and cautious. Unfortunately, a bias necessary to be listened to by those in power. Initially intended to be used by governments, businesses, and NGOs, an online tool was soon added to the project, allowing individuals to measure their use of the Earth's resources in either how many hectares or acres their lifestyle required, or in terms of how many Earths would be needed if everyone lived as they did. When I first used the tool, I found that what seemed to me to be a relatively simple life required the productive capacity of more than 4 Earths if everyone lived as I did. At a deep emotional level, this was unsatisfactory to me. I had grown up loving the wild lands of this earth in such a natural way that I didn't even realize the depth of that love until I watched draglines, bulldozers, and dredges turn my wild lands into housing developments, roads, and parking lots. What does one do when you know that something is wrong, existentially wrong? When you know the solutions, but that those solutions would be life-changing for you and for everyone. When you know that people in general will not do what is needed without great changes in almost everything that we have come to believe to be proper and normal. Raising my children seemed to require an acceptance of the lifestyles of my community. But when they were grown, I decided I would try something, even if finally the wrong thing. I would still learn and potentially be a source of information for others. I decided to try to live as close as I could to a lifestyle that would require only 1 Earth's productive capacity, while remaining part of the society. I wasn't trying to escape society or to be noble. I simply couldn't not respond to the measured and clear reality that humanity was using more of the Earth's resources than the Earth could sustainably supply. I knew that my project was artificial from the start. People in general couldn't, in the present society and economy, do what I was planning to do. For my experiment, it was necessary for me to live in a rural, off-grid setting. I wouldn't be allowed to live as I do where the vast majority of people live, but where ultimately it is even more important to make the kinds of changes I was going to make. My experiment is not a criticism of others. That is not the point. I have consciously chosen a process of discovery. Clearly, the vast majority of people don't have such an option, just as I didn't realize the possibility for a long time. I rather think of it as an experimental vehicle on a test track, not ready for the open road or city traffic. It is funny looking and uses a fuel that isn't readily available, and sometimes you have to give it a push start as part of its design. It has been my hope that if people, broadly and generally, realize that we are using right now much more of the Earth's capacity than is supportable over the geological long term, even over the next several generations, then more of us might look to these kinds of lifestyle changes and try different forms of small and large experiments in their own living situations. To presage one conclusion of my experiment, the singular greatest limitation to the success of how I live as a way to reduce the human impact on the environment is that there isn't a community gathered in the effort. Not necessarily to make it physically easier, but to share effort and material, to share experience and the new feelings that come with the daily activities. It is from the sharing of how one feels that new expectations come. This is a limitation that might be more easily addressed in places where most of us live. I live in a 500 square foot house, designed and built mostly by myself with help from my children and a couple of their friends. I was 71 years old the summer the house was built. The design made the most efficient use of commonly available construction and recycled materials. It is comfortable, efficient, embracing, and lovely. The off-grid solar setup is driven by a 1,200-watt solar array for the house and a 200-watt array for the work shed. The house wasn't designed primarily for solar gain, but does have large south-facing windows and the roof line placed to cut off direct sun in the summer and to collect direct sunlight in the winter, effectively warming the house on sunny days. House water comes from a hand-pumped deep well and is hand-carried. Rainwater is collected in barrels from the house and shed roofs and transferred to storage barrels for garden, greenhouse, and sundry uses. While I could go into detail about how every need is met, how waste is composted, how there is a plan to build soil over several years, how the greenhouse is used, how there is an attempt, ultimately not met, to have inputs and outputs net to near zero as natural ecological systems do. I am recording those details. But it is more important to talk about the principles that inform these efforts. It is a natural habit of people, when acquiring new skills and experience, to copy what they see. This is usually a good way to do things, but when the situations one is applying the new learning to are each very different, then it is more important to have the principles underlying what we do clearly in mind rather than the specific actions. At this time, most of the people trying to live environmentally appropriate lifestyles are living off-grid in rural settings, while the greatest need for changing lifestyles is in the towns, cities, and among the affluent. Only a tiny percentage of people can live off-grid on several acres, but what they learn and can teach about changing lifestyles are the principles that reduce their impact on the environment. Principles that can be applied to other situations with imagination and the desire to make important changes. Here are some of the principles that I have come to, ones that I began with and others coming as part of the experience. They are of two types: things that are physically designed into the way of life, and habits, beliefs, and expectations that support that way of life. Principles designed as structure. Number 1, hands-on steps designed into as many need-meeting actions as possible. For me, a hand pump, well, biased toward hand tools, wheelbarrow and shovel, composting toilet and composting system, and much more. 2, use single-use things at least twice, more if possible. The plastic produce bag from the store, used for the greens from the garden, and then as a dust cover. Cardboard boxes cut down and made into trays for mechanical parts, or as storage shelf organizers. A truly new lifestyle is made of hundreds of changes, small and big. 3, material inputs should nearly equal outputs in the manner of natural ecosystems. This is an impossible goal in the present economy, but a goal nonetheless. If perfect, there would be little or no garbage or waste product that isn't usefully used in some way. It can be simple, like having zero food waste, sorting clean, slightly gray, or toxic water for other uses, or more complicated, a composting system for all the organic waste that produces clean soil-building compost over several years. 4, make it difficult or impossible to be wasteful. This is a matter of design to limit use and choice. My small solar electric system forces a very small refrigerator freezer, which then forces care and shopping. Each living situation offers options that lead to choices that can be made to reduce use. Learn to do maintenance and repairs. This reduces replacement of various mechanicals, creates the habit of researching actual needs for and quality of all manner of things, and makes you into a community resource. These are all small things, in a sense insignificant, but they began the process of change in habits and expectations. Forming new habits and expectations. 1, the habit of questioning what you are doing and why. Is it wasteful? Can it be done with less pollution? Is the drive necessary, or would walking serve as well? 2, learn about your space. Whether you live in a forest, seacoast, desert, or city, the place where you live can be used with greater ecological efficiency when you know it well. 3, create comfortable spaces. An important part of your efforts come from devotion to and comfort in your space. 4, seek joy in what you're doing. Finding joy in how you are living can come in many ways, but often is related to the willingness to find it and to engage with others concerned with and acting on the materialism that overuses the Earth's resources. Mixed structure and expectation. 1, use community resources and support their maintenance. Support libraries, support local, especially truly organic farmers. As one example, where I live, our roads are maintained by the people who live here. We get together a few times a year and repair sections. Use technologies that increase safety, knowledge, communication, and engagement with the space in which you live. Avoid technologies that distract from the primary purpose of an ecologically sustainable lifestyle and that have high environmental costs. This requires research, but is teachable. While these principles may seem especially adapted to living in a rural setting, they can be applied in various ways to non-rural settings with imagination and desire. It seems to me that in urban settings there would be a greater need for leadership and community organizing of group activities, but organizing can be done around these principles and the variations of them as people discover new possibilities. Conclusions. The kinds of lifestyle changes that will ultimately have a meaningful impact on our precipitous movement toward environmental instability will only come from whole societies adapting to and adopting new expectations for how to live. Individual lifestyle changes will never be enough. Individual, family, and small group actions can help show options and provide encouragement, but a major effort will be required to adapt these beginnings to our communities, small towns, urban settings, and the profligate. These sorts of efforts are underway, though underreported and undersupported. It is also clear that human inventiveness will have to be a major part of how we approach the solutions to the changes in lifestyle. There will be no wholesale stepping back to simpler times, even as we will be living more simply. The controlled, thoughtful, negotiated uses of technology will be essential. Potentially, AI systems, for example, might facilitate the uses of a variety of community resources. Technology in support of less environmental impact and more meaningful human interaction, rather than being a source of greater impact and human isolation, must be a goal. The present economic system to the developed world makes ecologically sustainable lifestyles effectively impossible. Individuals and families, even with their best committed efforts, can seldom have ecological footprints less than 2 or 3 Earths. The average for the affluent can go to hundreds of Earths of consumption. Too often, the responsibility for lowering environmental impact is placed on the general population in wealthy countries and on the poor generally. This is a distraction to avoid responsibility by the greatest energy and material using entities. Polling suggests that a majority of people in developed countries voice concern with and act at some level on environmental issues. But they need to understand that their efforts to live more sustainably, while laudable, will only be effective if the very wealthy and corporate interests greatly reduce their environmental impacts. More would be accomplished by actions that hold the major environmental abusers to account than by the relatively small reductions of impact from lifestyle changes like I have made. It is obvious, sitting in the loft of my little house looking out over the beautiful high desert landscape, that the lifestyle I have been living is only a pale effort in the face of the challenges humanity as a whole faces. But it points out possibilities, more about the human capacity to try than the details of those efforts, an uncomfortable realization. Though I have to believe that beginning to create examples does matter. Final thoughts. Humanity is now the most powerful force acting on the Earth's biosphere on a daily basis, other than the sun. Our individual lifestyle changes, not so much choices for most of us, but rather uncritical acceptance of lifestyle, will determine what the world will be like for many of those alive now, and for their children, and for their children. Most people will follow the expectations of their communities, which makes leadership of vital importance. The economic equity and social justice movements must include stronger environmental protection emphasis. And emphasis needs to be shifted from equity based on the excesses of the middle classes to a broader sense of equity and justice to include living things generally. Reducing our impact on the environment will only be accomplished by reducing our total consumption by almost all sectors of society, especially by the worst abusers, toward what the earth can sustainably provide, and will only be peacefully done with equity and justice. This is not a trivial observation. But ultimately, reduction in human impact will happen, either under our influence or not. It will happen with the consideration of equity and justice or not. The differences will be in the consequences. It is up to us. And then what about my efforts, my ecological footprint, living alone, off-grid? Even with my best efforts, has never been better than 1.6 Earths, the global average. If I lived much closer to a town and could walk or bike most of the time, or if I was more isolated and directly involved in far more of my needs, I might reduce that number. If another person lived in the same house, the number would be reduced. But what finally matters is that how most of us live, even when very simply, is demanding of the Earth's resources. Reducing our impact on Earth's systems to the point of sustainability will require the attention and active engagement of a significant percentage of us at all levels of the society. This will be the ultimate and possibly the final test of our human capacities.